Are you stressed? How do you view stress? How does your body react to a stressful situation? When it comes to stress and suffering, they seem to be closely related. But did you know that you have control as to which experience you can have? Join me as we venture down the rabbit hole of stress, and let's discover how we can take a challenging moment and turn it into an experience that benefits us and helps us along the way. This is episode 23 of the Move It podcast with me, Jared Uraine from the FiveDiamondGroup.Vegas Realty. Thank you so much for tuning in. Lex, take it away. When it comes to anxieties, there is no shortage of them to pull from. Whether it's a financial crisis, family breakdowns, wars, all of the news headlines that talk about deadly disease outbreaks, even the natural disasters, whether they're man-made or natural, there's just no shortage of things to give us stress. And you add to that, what if you look in the mirror and you think, well, what is this growth I have? Is this going to be cancer? Or what about the world that my grandchildren are going to grow up in? In addition to these elements, marketing advertisers use negative stress to create a sense of urgency. They also use stress to make people feel like they're just not good enough. If you were to really listen, some of those advertisers use negative stress to make people feel like they're just simply missing out. In episode 21, we talked about digital distractions. Now, if we were to add all this together, just imagine how much stress we get in a day. This is different than it's been in many past generations. There certainly is no shortage of stress inputs for us to manage. It reminds me of a scripture that says, "Who of you, by being anxious, can add 1 cubit to its lifespan?" Seriously, worrying about a matter has zero effect on our lifespan, which is why it follows up with stop being anxious. But when we think about that practically, why do we even stress about something? Why do we worry? Why do we let these stresses affect our lives, our health, even our relationships? Dr. Saley is quoted as saying, "Stress is the non-specific response of the body to any demand." So that means everybody is always under some sort of degree of stress. So yes, life is difficult, and life has lots of stresses. It's hard. How we respond to it will have a dramatic effect on the results we get. In life, we often develop our reaction to stress by the environments we were raised in. And we typically see 2 types of people that respond to stresses differently. One who resist the stress, and the other who embrace the stress. Think about the strings on a guitar or even a violin. They need to be tight in order to get the correct tone. If you were to over-tighten those strings, what's going to happen? Of course, they're going to snap. And many people are afraid of that breakage. Too much stress, as they say. Something's got to give, right? But if you did not put enough stress or tension on that string, you're not going to get the right sound or the right tone. The same is true for our personal lives. Not all stress is bad, but when we avoid the stress, we create the environment of suffering, and resistance to that is where we end up being in a stressful or suffering situation. See, before a test, before a performance, before a job interview, even the healthy fear of fight or flight element, they're all healthy elements of stress. But if we use stress as a means to avoid something, well, that's where we end up having challenges. See, everyone experiences stress from time to time. Anything from our daily responsibilities to work and family, or even such serious life events like a new diagnosis or the death of a loved one. All of these are stress triggers. But we can create positive experiences even in a negative situation. Because stress can both be positive and negative, it's all about how we react. Positive stress can motivate us to do our best and achieve our goals. Too much stress can be harmful to our health. When we are stressed, our body releases hormones that gets us prepared to experience the flight or fight response. This fight or flight response really is helpful in the short term, but when it's activated for too long, well, this is where health problems such as high blood pressure, heart disease, anxiety settle in. So our response to stress really decides the outcome of our experience. It's almost like a fork in the road. Our attitude specifically is how we can react to it. When it comes to our response, it absolutely can affect the future results. Let's walk down that path. Let's consider a moment where you have a stressful moment. If we were to view this moment negatively, well, this can open the door down the way to dependencies, substance abuse, or even trauma or anxiety. When you avoid the stress, what we're really trying to do is actually avoid the suffering that comes with it. No one really wants the suffering. When it comes to avoiding stress, it actually might be a reaction to trying to avoid the suffering that's associated with it. No one really wants to deal with suffering. That's almost traumatic in itself. But we can learn how to manage the stress, and we can absolutely create the experience where you are not suffering. So many people today suffer from their choice of just not dealing with the stress input. What that really means is that we often have to try and deal with the problem or find a way to deal with the problem. Alternately, part B is we can have a choice to either respond the same way and continue down that path of pain, or we can choose to find a way to deal with the trauma, finding a way to embrace that experience as a growing opportunity. While there are many different ways to develop that quality, here are some ways that we can help manage the stress while we are experiencing it. Consider regular exercise. Those endorphins help us have positive experiences and release the stress. Add to that getting enough sleep. Sometimes it's a hard thing to do, but you add that with a healthy diet, even relaxation techniques. Well, a lot of those elements combined really gives us a positive experience. What about spending time with loved ones? That really help us enjoy the time that we spend together. And if we really need additional help, well, there's always professional help to deal with the struggles and the challenges of managing stress. Just remember, stress is a normal part of life. And if you feel that it's interrupting your daily life or challenging you from being able to achieve certain things, well, those are moments when we really have to analyze our situation. Studies have shown that 20 minutes of journaling can help us relieve some of these stresses, whether it's giving a data dump into the journal or finding a solution to our problems. The goal here is to think about the good that can come out of a painful experience or even a traumatic situation. It can absolutely help us reap better outcomes in our lives. The concept of benefit finding, this is the technique of journaling and finding positive things. Well, it's certainly helped people with social or anxiety disorders in many different ways. For example, it's helped them to reframe their experience in a more positive light. If someone with a traumatic experience is dealing with social anxiety, they might be able to find benefit in the situation where they were previously forced to interact with people by realizing that they were able to overcome their anxiety and have a successful experience. When it comes to benefit finding, another way of its positive output is to help people focus on the positive aspect of their lives. Now, this can help reduce the overall levels of stress and anxiety, as well as helping them cope with future stresses. Finally, when it comes to finding benefits, people can help develop a more resilient mindset and help them cope with future challenges by realizing what their limitations are and how they can manage that stress. Now, just keep in mind, benefit finding, this is not a cure for social or anxiety disorders. This is just simply one tool that can help people get used to managing their challenges, managing their symptoms, and even improving their quality of life. If you are struggling with a social or an anxiety disorder, it really is important to seek professional help. A therapist can help you reach and develop a treatment plan that'll work for you and tailor to your situation. So then, how can we deal with stress? Or really better yet, how can we grow from a stressful experience? Stress can be a negative experience, but it can also be a positive one. It can motivate us to achieve our goals. It can help us learn and grow. Now, here are some ways to help us grow from stress. Number one, accept the stress. Stress is a part of life, and the first step to growing from stress is really just accepting it. Instead of trying to resist the fear of it or fighting it, don't even pretend that it's not there. let's try and have an optimistic outlook on it. And then once we accept the stress, well, then we can really start managing it. Reminds me of a quote or a scripture that says to just not be anxious about the next day, because the next day is going to have its own problems. Let's deal with it today. Number 2, identify the source of the stress. One way I've been able to do this is, especially when I wake up in the middle of the night and I have a problem, write it down, put it in a journal. Identify what the problem is and even a possible solution, but don't make that the item to solve the problem with. When you know what's causing the stress, you can start to address it. And if the stress is coming from a situation that you just can't control, well, having options to consider is one way to cope with it. That'll allow you the time and space to even process it and figure out a solution for it down the road. If you know the stress is coming from a situation you can control, well, then the obvious answer is to try and find a solution that'll help you get it solved. In addition, when you're making these adjustments, don't try and be a perfectionist. Just set realistic goals. We don't need to set high standards that we can't achieve and then shoot ourselves in the foot. The best way is to just find the best solution that is within our tolerance level. Now, when it comes to finding some of these solutions, well, of course, finding peace and calmness in all of this is one of the biggest ways that we can help reduce the amount of toxic stress that comes with it. A discerning man will remain calm. Managing our negative emotions really is the third way to do that, and that helps us have clear thinking. So sometimes we have to be aware that we're thinking negative thoughts so that we can remove them and have a positive response. One way to do that is by identifying what our purpose is. If we have our why, then we're probably going to be orderly and balanced. And when we have that purpose, we can find the positive, the silver lining in everything that's there. We can even reflect on some of these challenges and grow from it. Grow from that stressful experience. And that helps us be better equipped for stresses that come in the future. When it comes to being able to grow from these experiences, well, if we have our list of things that have really bothered us, we can drop it into a calendar for follow-up. We can put it in a journal or in a checklist so that we can then deal with it later. Any which way that helps us be able to get it off of our mind and onto somewhere where we can manage it is one of the best ways for us to manage that stress. Now, finally, don't be afraid to ask for help. If you realize this stress is just overwhelming, reach out to a friend, a family member, a therapist, even a professional. There's no shame in admitting that we need help. Stress is inevitable, and yes, it can be a difficult experience, but it doesn't have to be a negative one. This episode is not intended to address all of the issues, but really just to bring awareness of the capacity that we have to choose the outcome we would like to see. I challenge you to take advantage of some of these techniques and find ways that you can relieve your stress by dealing with these types of perspectives using the mind shift. Hopefully these tips can help you grow from stress and experience a much more happiness in your life. I want to thank you so much for tuning into this episode 23 of the Move It podcast. If you like this episode, please feel free to like it on the thumbs up button. Please feel free to share, and more importantly, save those notifications for the next episode that comes up. This is following our August series of work-life balance experiences in life. And I want to thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Jared with Uraine Five Diamond Group here at Vice Realty. And be cool like a butterfly.